Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Angela Vorpal of angelavorpal.com and the Law School Network on Facebook. And in today's video, we are tackling all things law school admissions. I asked you guys what questions you had, what you always wanted to know about getting into law school. And so that is what we're going to dive into today. And I'm so excited because to help us walk through it, we have Anna Ivy. Anna is the former Dean of Admissions at the University of Chicago Law School, and she also started her own law school admissions consulting company. And so she is going to give us all of the ins and outs. So welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, Angela. It's great to be here.
I can't wait to dive into today's video. We had so many questions. I can't wait for us to get to them all. And the first question is, we've all heard of the hard numbers. So your LSAT score and your undergraduate GPA being incredibly important in the law school admissions process. What role do those two numbers really play in terms of your shot at getting into law school?
So, law schools talk about a holistic process, right? The H word. And I think sometimes it can be interpreted perhaps a little too optimistically, meaning, oh, I can write my way around non-competitive numbers, and it doesn't really work that way. I would say in the pyramid of factors that go into the decision, or at least ones that you have some control over, because remember, there's all kinds of stuff happening in the background that you have no control over whatsoever. It's much bigger than you. Institutional priorities, different demographics they have to manage, that is all bigger than you. Be zen, like, let that go, focus on the stuff you can control. And in the pyramid of factors, I would put LSAT, or GRE score plus undergraduate transcript together in combination really sit at the top of the pile. And that doesn't mean that all these other things and all these other soft factors don't matter, especially in the competitive year like we are in the midst of right now. Yeah, schools can afford to be really picky, and so of course you can't neglect the soft factors either. But LSAT, undergrad performance, boom, sit at the top. Those are going to be very important, whether it's a tough year or a softer year.
I know that another question that a lot of students have is between the LSAT and the GRE. And so, do you have any insight or feedback for students who are trying to decide which one they should take? Is there any advantage to taking one over the other?
Yeah, so the first thing I would point out is that not all law schools accept the GRE. Many of them do. What their policies are going to be next year or the year after that, I don't know. They might not know yet either. So the LSAT is still the safer test to take because they all accept the LSAT. Now, here's the other thing. The GRE is, I think, for most people, the easier test. Law schools understand this. Also, a lot more people take the GRE. For every whatever random master's degree out there, those are people taking the GRE as opposed to a very, very specific pool for the LSAT. So getting 98th percentile in the GRE will not be considered as impressive as getting the 98th percentile in the LSAT. So, that factors into. I will say that just from our experience in our practice, the people who applied with GRE scores tended to be really strong in other aspects of their application. I think that unless that is the case, an LSAT score is going to serve you better than the GRE. But it's in flux, and as I say, I don't know what schools are going to do going forward. But for some people, the GRE just plays more to their strengths. So I think it's fine to go just do some diagnostic tests. And if one really plays more to your strengths than the other, even if that is the GRE, then I'd rather see you do really, really well on the GRE than have a really mediocre score on the LSAT. So you have to kind of go figure that out by yourself. But do investigate which schools are not taking the GRE, because if those are important schools for you on your list, boom, that knocks the GRE out, at least for now.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that the LSAT and undergraduate GPA, without a doubt, are the two strongest factors. But what about all of the soft factors? I know that that is a murkier area and a little bit harder to kind of wrap your arms around. But in your experience, what are some of the strongest soft factors that law students have going for them when they're applying?
Yeah, I think all else being equal, I think you're a stronger candidate if you have work experience after college. versus coming straight through. Law school is a bit of an outlier in that, for example, compared to MBA programs, you're expected to have work experience before you start business school. And you're expected to have gone through some of that self-discovery out in the working world. There's so much about yourself that you don't know when all you've done is school. You probably know yourself pretty well as a student, but who you are out in the working world, is a big question mark for a lot of people when they're still in school. So, for most law schools, you can apply to go straight through, but whatever you have to offer at that point in your, law school journey, presumably you would only be adding to it, right? And the other thing is, if you want to go straight through, the law schools might see whatever your cool accomplishments are senior year of college, but if you're submitting nice and early in the cycle, September, October, November, even December of your senior year, they're not seeing your complete record. And you don't have the same options for recommendations that you do if you're applying with the totality of your senior year and the totality of your college experience. So work experience, and I usually am sort of shouting into the wind when I talk to people who want to go straight through. Very often that pressure is coming from parents. They're well-meaning, but it's not making you a stronger applicant to go straight through. But there you go. That goes into a bigger question of, why are you applying? What's the motivation here? Where is it coming from? So work experience, I like to see. Life experience really matters. And that's where, when they talk about the holistic approach to reviewing files, they do pay attention to all of that. What is your background? What opportunities did you have or not have? What did you take advantage of that was available to you? What have you made happen? To the extent that you have a life outside of school, and ideally you do, you've had some kind of impact that you can demonstrate somewhere in your application. That might be in terms of activities, it might be solo things that you do for your own enrichment. It might be taking care of family. It can be things in your personal life too, but you want to show that, you've got other stuff going on and it matters. It matters to other people. It matters to your community in some way, that you have some kind of impact. The nice thing is that law schools are pretty agnostic about what those activities are. So do whatever is most natural for you to enjoy and make a difference. But it doesn't have to do one thing or another. Sometimes I hear from parents, especially, they're like, well, obviously you have to be on the debate team. No, you don't. Obviously you have to join the pre-law society. No, actually not at all. Obviously you should go work on the Hill. You can, but you don't have to. So take advantage of that agnosticism that law schools have, where they're pretty indifferent as far as what you go after, but whatever it is, do it really well, and distinguish yourself.
That's such great advice, and it tailors perfectly into the next question, which I know is at the top of a lot of people's minds, which is, what about the personal statement? Do you have any insights or things people should be keeping in mind when they are writing their personal statements?
Yeah, well, the first thing you'll discover, if you haven't already, is that the law schools phrase their essay prompts very differently. It can be everything from these long, belabored essay prompts with word count that already constitutes half an essay on its own, to what I call the mind reading prompts, something like, tell us something that you think the admissions committee should know, which annoys me, because I'm like, okay, that's your job, actually, to tell them what it is you want to know. How are they supposed to know? Read your minds? Anyway, you can find a whole range. I think if you're feeling paralyzed by these prompts, the way to snap out of that is that you can think about telling the admissions officer, having them understand by the end of 2 pages double spaced, why are you here knocking on their doors, wanting to spend all this blood, sweat, and tears and heartburn on this law school adventure? And I find the answers tend to be pretty binary. A lot of people have a pretty clear idea of what they want to accomplish with their law degree, and so it flows rather naturally. Or people really don't know why they're going. Again, it's their parents are on their backs, or they don't really want to tackle the job market. They don't know what else to do. And for them, it's like dental surgery, pulling together 2 pages double spaced about why you are doing this. And so for the latter group, I don't think it's disqualifying, but this might not be the right time. You might need to just go out and get some work experience, some life experience, just soul searching. Think about why you're doing this, because you have 2 pages to write. And the good news is that you really don't have to follow a specific formula. Whatever your story is for wanting the law degree, first of all, it should be credible. Sometimes the goals that people articulate really aren't going to be served best or very well by a law degree. And then you should really go kind of think that through. And maybe law school is actually not the best move for you, and that's okay. But it needs to be credible. It needs to be well written. By well written, I mean, you know how to tell a story, your grammar is good, your punctuation is good, there aren't gross typos in there. It does not have to be flowery or beautiful. You're not applying for an MFA program in fiction writing. If you have that kind of writing skill, great, use it, but truly, that's not the standard. So don't let that sort of haunt you. And what I sometimes find, and I think this is where perfectionism kicks in and people just feel anxiety about just treating it as done and hitting submit, which is very scary, is they want to belabor the essay into like 20, 30 drafts. And by the end there, they've had an essay that they could have submitted a month ago, but they kept futzing with it. And time is going by, and they're losing sleep over whether they should use the word impact or effect. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Those kinds of little choices are not going to affect the outcome. So, there's certainly parts of this process that are inherently stressful, but don't spend stress on stuff that isn't actually going to affect the outcome. One of the things I think that really differentiates the good essays from the great essays from the good are they show some fire in the belly, meaning this is something you feel strongly about, and what you're signaling is, I'm going to hit this ground running when I get there, and I'm so excited to take advantage of the resources. That's hard to fake, that kind of fire in the belly, that kind of sort of enthusiasm for doing this. Sometimes you'll get a perfectly decently written essay that is something like, well, I want to do sports law because I like sports. Ooh, there are a lot of essays like that, a lot, usually guys. And that might be perfectly fine to get you into any number of law schools. Are the top law schools going to find that exciting? Maybe not. Where's that fire in the belly? You'd also be expected, if this is really something you're passionate about, you'd be expected to have done some homework on it and be following that news. Whatever the issues are, whatever the problems are that you want to solve with a law degree, and you should have some sense of what those are. We live in the internet age. Go educate yourself. If you are excited about automation and how that intersects with new legal regimes and new legal policy, you should know that that is already a well-established field in the law, and you should have some familiarity with the issues that these brilliant minds have been devoting to that topic. So, you can't be passive about this. So if you're not sure what problems you're trying to solve or get involved in, go figure it out. Go figure it out, because otherwise it's going to be hard to write, compelling essay for that particular audience.
Oh my gosh, that hits me so hard because I was one of those applicants that went straight through from undergrad straight to law school, and I didn't have a great idea about why I wanted to go to law school. I had a few ideas of things that I was good at or interested in and internships I had had, but to your point, we are in the internet age and people are on LinkedIn, and you can cold reach out and do informational interviews. And this stuff is not unfindable, like it's not unknowable, right? So you can absolutely dig deeper into the thing you think you might want to do or the problem you think you might want to solve with not terribly too much effort. And I think that's just such a wonderful take on how to go deeper in your personal statement and make it really unique and personal to you. And that brings me to my next question. I know that you mentioned a little bit earlier about things going on behind the scenes that prospective students are not seeing. And to that point, is it significantly more advantageous to apply early in the cycle, early admission, than it is to wait and apply for the regular cycle?
Yeah, so law schools use what's called rolling admissions. So here's what a lot of people deduce from that, because in a rolling admission system, they open up application reading on a certain day and then they close it months later. And over the course of that period, they are making offers, but they're not making all of their offers. And that's one of the weirdnesses. And we'll circle back to that. But what a lot of people have taken away from this, and this is why I really urge you not to go hang out on Reddit because it will make you crazy. People come away with the idea that, like, oh my gosh, if applications open up on September 1, I'm going to have my application done September 1. And that's important. That's wrong. That's just flat out wrong. And it is completely fine if you submit it in September, October, even November. If you look at schools that have early decision deadlines, like a round 1 early decision deadline, they tend to be in November. That is their concept of early. That is how they are defining it. So if you think that you have to get it in September 1 or within weeks of applications opening, that is just not true. And that is not to the benefit of your application necessarily. It's fine to submit it that early, but I would not be cutting any corners to get it in September 15 as opposed to November 1 or Thanksgiving or whatever. So where I start getting a little bit concerned about timeline is when we start bleeding into the following calendar year. What I saw a lot of, and my team did too, this cycle of all cycles to do this. Oh, it's painful. Applying right before the deadline. You're basically asking at best for a spot on the wait list, which you can, that's your prerogative, but I don't think that's a smart strategy. So for folks who are looking forward to an application cycle, I would plan on getting it in October, November, December is plenty early. Now, what's weird about rolling admissions in practice is that you might get your application in nice and early, and you're sitting here in June of the following year, still waiting to hear anything, which I think they're very fast to take your application fee, and then it's just radio silence for half a year or whatever it is. I find that really unprofessional. It's not unusual, unfortunately. The way rolling admissions works on their end is that they will make a certain number of offers before their deposit deadlines, which are right around now, usually in April. But they hold back decisions on a lot of files, even before their own decision deadlines or enrollment deposit deadlines. They don't really tell you this. They don't make that super transparent. So chances are by that point, this time in the year, you've probably heard back from your safeties. You've probably heard back from some targets. You're probably still waiting to get final decisions from some targets and probably a fair number of reaches. And hopefully by this point in the cycle, they've done you the courtesy of saying either you're on a wait list or hang in there or whatever. But some schools just don't tell you anything. And you're like, you just had a deposit deadline and I still don't have an answer. And I submitted back in October. Like, what is happening here? Doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It's just gross mismanagement in law school admissions. It's quite common. So there you go. What that does mean is that there's this whole system of making offers over the course of the summer. And I would say, call that whatever you want. I mean, I call it a wait list. Some schools call it something else. They call it hold or reserve, whatever. It does not matter what it's called. If it is after the deposit deadlines, typically in April, think of it as a wait list, which means chances are you're not getting that offer. But if you really care about that school, you need to keep fighting for it. And unlike undergrad admissions where you submit your applications and then there's really not that much more for you to do, you just, you're kind of waiting for them to decide your fate. You do not want to take that approach.
So I had a follow-up question to that. If you have not heard back from a law school or you're put on the wait list, what are some of the steps you can take to get the answer that you want?
Yeah, the burden is basically shifted on you to keep fighting for that spot. Even though you submitted your application way back when and ideally, gave them all the information they needed, you have to keep fighting for that spot. So what ends up happening over that summer, basically anything post-April, is if you care about us getting that spot, you have to make it as easy as possible for them to say yes. And the best way to do that is to pre-commit yourself and say something along the lines of, if I were fortunate enough to receive an offer, I would accept it. I would withdraw everywhere else. It's very heavy-handed that they put you in that position, but Basically, it turns into Hunger Games in the waitlist season. And if you want that spot, you've got to make it as easy as possible for them to say yes. And when that spot opens up, you want to make it easy for them to call you as opposed to somebody else who might be humming and hawing, want to negotiate. At that point, you're not in a position to negotiate. You're not. So that should also make it easier for you to narrow down your list. What schools do you care enough about that you would be willing to make that promise and not be able to negotiate anything, whether that's a deferral or financial aid or whatever the case may be, you're willing to make that trade-off. And that's just a function of where we are in the season and you just not having a whole lot of leverage at that point.
And would that be a letter of continued interest or a letter of intent? Is that the form that that kind of communication would take?
Those are all the same. Yeah. You're just basically staying on their radar screen in one form or another. And that might take the form of actual real updates. If you don't have updates, that's okay. You just remind them that you're still very interested. If you're not willing to pre-commit to a school like that, then obviously don't make that promise, but you can say you remain a top choice. Thank you for continuing to consider my application. I would also say I'm comfortable, and I'm a big stickler for sort of admissions ethics and application ethics. So trust me when I say I would not be advising you to take crazy risks here. I'm comfortable if you make that promise to attend and withdraw everywhere else to more than one school, as long as whoever calls you first wins the prize of you. And that's probably not all the schools where you're still waiting for decisions, but it's probably a couple. And you have to think about, okay, which are the ones that I'd be happy no matter what? And whoever makes that call first, game over, we're done. Thank you very much.
For people who find themselves in a position of being accepted to more than one law school, what steps can they take to potentially negotiate additional scholarship money?
You don't really have that leverage until you have an offer from that school you want to negotiate with, and you have a really nice financial aid offer from a peer school. Until you have that really nice offer that beats the other schools in terms of the financing, you don't really have any leverage to go negotiate. Now, you've been made the offer of admission. So honestly, there's no downside risk to asking. The worst they can do is say no, take it or leave it. But unless you can show, hey, I'm going to attach the letter from your peer school over here that offered me a really sweet deal, is there any chance you would consider re-examining my financial aid offer? You don't really have a lot of opportunity to move that needle. And some schools just institutionally are more open to negotiating than others. You don't have control over that. But as I say, there's no real downside risk. They're not going to say, oh, you dared to negotiate financial aid with us, we're going to retract our offer of admission. That wouldn't happen. So, just be polite about it, I would say. And assume you get sort of one bite at that apple. You can go to a school once and say, hey, can we revisit this? I think doing that more than once, I think there's going to be little appetite for that on the school side.
Okay, so the next thing I was hoping we could do is some rapid fire Q&A with some very specific questions that students had. And the first one that comes up all the time is this situation of a splitter or reverse splitter, where either your LSAT score is lower than the law school's median score or your undergraduate GPA is lower than the law school's median. What sort of feedback do you have for splitters or reverse splitters?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is I would plug those two numbers, whatever your split numbers are, into the calculator and see what that does to the odds for your particular schools. It might be, for safety schools, it doesn't matter if you're a splitter, you're still a big catch for them, right? So I assume we're talking about reach schools. And for those, chances are you're going to end up on a wait list. And you're going to have to keep fighting for that spot and pre-commit and all those, you're going to be in for a marathon and not a sprint. But that's okay. Keep fighting, don't give up. But, probably you're not going to get a final answer right away from your schools if you're a splitter for that school.
In terms of taking the LSAT more than once, do you think it's worth taking the LSAT again to try to get your score up a couple of points after you've submitted your application to make yourself more competitive?
After you've submitted, you're sort of rolling the dice about whether they would even look at the new score, and schools have different policies around that. Some schools will put your application on hold if they have seen that you are even registered for a future test, which I think is bananas. for a whole variety of reasons. And frankly, they should not even have visibility into what tests you've registered for. I think that's indefensible. However, be that as it may, I think if post submission, I would not be futzing around anymore with standardized tests. You've had plenty of time to retake tests. I do think that people should plan on taking it twice and not just once. Very important. Most people are not happy with their first scores.
And in your experience, do law schools look at the higher LSAT score, or do they average both LSAT scores?
They'll see scores going back, I think it's 5 years, but ultimately they have very strong incentives, rankings driven, to focus on the high score. So if you do retake it, treat it as a do-over.
Great. And the next question I know a lot of students have is for people who have gotten a less than stellar undergraduate GPA, but have since gone on to grad school and have a really high grad school GPA. Can that grad school GPA in any way take the place of the undergraduate GPA or supplement it in any way that can be helpful to their application?
I think it depends on the nature of the program. There are some master's programs that are just not very difficult in terms of grading, and law schools will know that. But at the same time, even if that's the case, it gives them a newer set of academic performance metrics to look at. I wouldn't say go to grad school just for law school admissions, unless you actually have some interest in whatever that degree is. But yes, if you have a grad school transcript, that goes into the mix and it will be scrutinized just as much as your undergrad transcript. Now, understand that they have to report undergrad numbers to the ABA and therefore the rankings. So they only have so much wiggle room to ignore undergrad numbers.
Gotcha. And is there a magic number in your mind of how many law schools students should be thinking about applying to?
15, it's a good number. If it's more than that, then I think you need to go back and do some more homework and some more soul searching about which schools are actually useful to you if you get in, and which ones you would actually go to if you got in.
Next question, how much does it matter the prestige of the college that you went to? So if you have those high hard numbers of LSAT, of undergraduate GPA, does it matter that you went to an undergrad that may not be that well known?
It matters more how you did there compared to your peers. So when admissions officers get what's called an academic summary report, again, because LSAC has the monopoly on all this data for people who apply to LSAC law schools, is they'll see for the last several years how many law school applicants from that school scored where in the grade distribution for that school. So they can see very easily if you have a school that has a lot of grade inflation, Ivy League, most of them cough, cough. They'll also be able to see if a school doesn't do grade inflation, right? So they'll be able to put your GPA into context for the grading practices for that school. Ultimately, they're trying to put together a mix of people from different backgrounds. They don't want to fill the entire incoming class with people from 10 schools. So if you are from a school that isn't, razzle dazzle top ranked, absolutely you should still go for it. And, as with anyone, no matter where you go to college, you want to perform as well as you can academically, because that matters so much.
Excellent. Next question for you. For people who are looking to take a gap year between college and law school, what are some of the things they should be thinking about in terms of getting the absolute most out of that gap year to make them as competitive as possible for law school?
Yeah, I think that is really up to you. First of all, the market will tell you what your opportunities are. Sometimes, those are good ones, sometimes they're not. Even if you don't have great options, you make the most of it, whatever that means in that context. You bring your A game, you learn as much as you can, you network with as many people as you can, you try to impress the people you're working with so that, if you choose to ultimately ask them for a recommendation, they can point to specific ways in which you really impressed them and stood out for them. And if it turns out to be something that you realize, oh, I don't really enjoy whatever this thing is, that's amazing information to have too, because part of what you're doing is narrowing down the kinds of things that you want to pursue. So even if it turns out to be a terrible job experience, you've learned something important about yourself out in the working world, about what kinds of roles you like or don't, what kinds of conditions you like or you don't, what kind of people you want to be working with. It's all valuable information, but it's really on you to make the most of whatever that opportunity is. As with activities, schools don't really care that much what it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be law related, but you have to make the most of whatever it is that you're committing to in that summer or that year.
We've been talking a lot about work experience prior to law school, and for the non-traditional students out there, so people who have been working 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20 years since college, and law is a second career for them. How does that play with law school admissions? Is it an advantage, disadvantage, neutral? What have you seen?
The advantage is that you're grown up, which is wonderful from their perspective, and they want grown-ups in the classroom too. You're going to have a totally different perspective on life and life experience and real things that come up in the cases that you'll be talking about in class. So that's just a great contribution. It's completely fine to be older and wiser, as I called it. It's completely fine to be a career changer. Just make sure that in your essay you help them understand why you're doing this, especially since you've probably been doing something else for some period of time, and help them understand why are you here, why are you doing this, and what do you want to do with this degree that you're pursuing.
Great. And the last question I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the mistakes that you see applicants making all the time?
One is applying when you're not in fighting shape. And these are usually, errors that you choose to make, meaning you apply right before the deadline. Why? This is, it's hard enough to get in. Why are you making it so much harder for yourself with the timeline? Then, go be nice and early in the following fall. I think testing retakes are a tricky question because, as I was saying before, I think people should plan on taking it twice. After you've taken it twice, the LSAT has probably measured what it's going to measure. When I see people taking it more than twice, the score might go up a point. Is that worth it? Probably not. The score is just as likely to go down. It's just, I think for most people, not a good use of their time. And what really breaks my heart is when I see people chasing this fictional score, because they'll take it twice, 3 times, 4 times, 6 times. And each time they're saying to themselves, oh, I just had a bad day the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. I know that, this next one is going to be better. That's just not what happens for most people. And in the meantime, you're just putting your life on hold, or you're pushing out your submission of your applications. So there's a lot of magical thinking around LSAT scores and retaking. I would say take it twice, maybe a third time, and then call it a day.
That is such incredibly valuable information, Anna. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And I completely lied before. I'm going to ask you one more question before I let you go. And it's about the current cycle. I know the 2020 cycle has been crazy, and the 2021 cycle coming up, and there's a lot of questions and unknowns. And if you could just share with us what you and your team have seen in terms of this cycle and what you expect from the next cycle.
So it has been a bear, no question. The number of high LSAT scores, and they drop out of the pool and come back. It's usually sort of counter-cyclical with the economy and other things going on in the world. They showed up in droves this cycle. And so people who scored 175 and up, that increased 100% this cycle. The people who scored, I think, 170 to 174, it went up something like 60%, which means that the most selective schools got to be even pickier than normal, and that has ripple effects throughout the whole system. The question we get all the time is like, well, is that going to be the same next year? I don't know. Nobody knows. If I had that crystal ball, I would be, I don't know, playing the currency markets and doing fancy arbitrage. I don't have that crystal ball. They don't either. The schools don't know either. It's anyone's guess. But honestly, even without knowing that, just assume you're going to submit the strongest application you can. Because even if it turns out to be a softer year, the stronger your application is, the more playing room you have to negotiate things like price, which is part of this very strange system we have here in the United States about how higher education gets financed. So, regardless of what else is happening with the applicant pool, you're going to submit your very best application. That doesn't change.
Anna, thank you so much for being here. All of this information has been incredible. If people want to reach out to you, learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, so come find us on, the usual suspects in social media. If you want to come to our website, we've got a form where you can come say hi. The website is annaivey.com. The spelling is ANNAIVEY.com. Yes, that is my actual last name. But, I'm on Twitter, we're on Facebook, come find us, LinkedIn. We're always happy to hear from you.
Anna, thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful having you.
It's wonderful to talk with you, Angela, anytime.
Bye guys, see you at the next one.